But Rob made a good point. There's been no press conference, right? There's been no video call with journalists who might be interested. The narrative is so tightly controlled that it makes you wonder about the way they're doing this.
Okay, about 3 months ago, we made one of our most popular videos about the unanswered question for USL, as they had at the time presented the grand plans of both a D1 and a pro rel system to come. There's about 10 questions we asked at that time. Some have been answered, some not. So with that said, we'll lead in with our first question. When will the first division and promotion and relegation happen?
Yeah, so this is a screenshot from the video that we did, which you can still watch. It's still the top video on the channel page. If you look for Morning Kickaround, we scripted this out because we were curious about these questions. And by the way, included in that video 3 months ago is the response we received from USL when we put these questions to them. We didn't say, let's ask these questions and talk about how there's no answers. We wanted to go to USL and say, what answers do you have for us about this stuff? And they had none. They said, we have no updates at this time. We do have updates now. Now, they didn't reach out to us directly to give us updates, but they did publish some updates. Robbie, you made a good point, though. You made a good point. It is interesting. Now, there's a little bit of public-facing activity in regards to Paul McDonough speaking to the press. I've reached out. I've gotten no response when asking for Paul McDonough or Tony Scholes, who's not really on the job until the summer. Flat out ignored to this point, which I'm a little disappointed about, to be honest with you. At least to say, for USL to say, we can't make those people available to you, even though I know Paul McDonough has talked to people. He talked to Paul Tenorio in the piece that dropped when they made their most recent announcement. But Rob made a good point. There's been no press conference, right? There's been no video call with journalists who might be interested. The narrative is so tightly controlled that it makes you wonder about the way they're doing this. I'm just saying it's going to invite questions. So let's address the questions that we put up in the video and where we are now. When will it happen, Rob?
Well, we do have the answer to that. It looks like the Division 1, the USL Premier, is set to start in 2028. As far as the promotion and relegation aspect on that, I don't think we have anything concrete just yet.
No, we absolutely do not. As you said, 2028. It identified in the most recent update. I will remind you that when they made the original announcement, they were a little more wishy-washy and said 2027, 28. So I think it's pretty clear that they threw that out, hoping they could be aggressive and maybe get things together for 2027. Went, well, actually, no, we're not going to get there. Let's kick it back a year. So now it's 2028. What about number 2 here?
How many clubs will be in each of these new divisions? Specifically, we do have an answer for the top 2.
Yes, we do. 20 and 20 is what they told us. Now, that's full build out. Eventually, long term is what they described it for Division 1, right? And we know, and the PLS will be involved in these questions too, but we know via the PLS, got to have 12 in year 1, got to have 14 by year 3, and then from there, whatever you want to do. It doesn't say you have to get to 20, but their target is 20. Now, again, when we ask the question, it feels like we should be able to give a firm answer, but we kind of can't. Not at least for the first division in terms of when it will have 20 teams, Rob. We know they want to have 20 teams, but when exactly will it have 20 teams? That's still up in the air.
Third question, how many teams are going to go up and down in this system?
No answers. Hints in the direction, but again, via Paul Tenorio's piece at The Athletic, that it could be a very small number. It could be 2 and 2, and then eventually it'll be 3 and 3. But as we said, if you're populating a first division up to 20 teams over the long term, when you're not going to have that initially, then what you're talking about is probably promoting teams as they're ready into the first division until you get to 20, and then enacting what will be your permanent approach to pro rel. That is what I would guess. And I'm sure that they are still knocking around ideas on what that actually looks like, Rob.
And this is the sort of thing that a press conference or an open call to journalists, they said controlled narrative. You ask a handful of reporters, they're going to poke some holes and maybe find some Swiss cheese elements to this. But we move on. Next question we pose to USL. What exactly is the process for clubs that win promotion but don't meet PLS standards?
There's no answer to this, right? This is not addressed as of yet, right? This is not addressed as of yet. That doesn't mean they don't have some sort of idea of what they will do with this. Again, it doesn't mean that there won't be waivers either given to clubs who are promoted. How strict U.S. Soccer is on those PLS when it comes to promotion and relegation is very much at the heart of all of this, right? If there's not going to be either a revocation of all of the PLS or a refinement or a revision of the PLS that lets teams with 10,000 seat stadiums or 7,500 seat stadiums or that play in a 250,000 person metropolitan market or whatever it might be. Again, you have time zone requirements. Like if those things that directly impact the sanctioning of a league are not fully revised or fully revoked, then there will have to be waivers given. Is what we presume. And again, that's kind of at the heart of all of this, true, right? Is USL actively working with US Soccer on the professional league standards?
That's one of the biggest assumptions. I think we're all assuming that they are, but this is amongst the things that I would ask if I was on a conference call with Papadakis or any of the other USL officials, is what is the communication? What is the going back and forth between you and the federation? Like, because without this, we don't know how realistic any of this really is if there isn't a conversation happening between those entities.
Absolutely. And I know lots of people would say, oh, the PLS were written to benefit MLS and they should be tossed out. Okay, that's your idea of what should happen. We don't know what's going to happen. Billy Bob asking a question that immediately comes to mind for me, has U.S. Soccer said anything yet? The answer is no. Now, they haven't said they're going to sanction or not going to sanction, which I don't know if that means there's an application process happening. Again, what is the back and forth? Just to have USL say, we have reached out to US Soccer and we are engaged in conversations around our plans to launch a first division and promotion and relegation would be something. It wouldn't be detail. We would still have a lot of unanswered questions, but it would be something. We would at least know that they're doing a thing everybody is asking about. And as of yet, we have no reason to think that's happening because they haven't said anything. And I don't know what U.S. Soccer's responsibility here is. Let's talk this out a bit, Rob. Should U.S. Soccer say internally, well, we can't say anything until they say something, right? Because USL's made a lot of noise, and U.S. Soccer has a role to play in this process, and yet they haven't put out a statement that says, well, you know what? I think maybe they did. Maybe they put out a very cursory statement that said something about acknowledging USL's plans here. I think they did it at the time when we go back to the original announcement, which was what, February of 2025. We're a year into this now. So, but I don't believe we've had one since then, right? We haven't had anything since then about, what the plan might be for U.S. Soccer. Again, U.S. Soccer said they welcome the innovation.
Yeah,
That's
I was going to say,
I
remember there was, when the announcements first came out, I think the only thing I've really heard is they're open to it or they'll welcome conversation. But I don't think there's been any firm, like, yes, USL's come to us and where's some problems we have, but we're working through them. There's been nothing like that. And this is almost a non-starter. This whole thing, we're all assuming that, of course, that they'll massage the PLS or at least give waivers of this and that. But we really just don't know. Just a boilerplate statement saying we are talking to each other would satisfy a lot in my mind when it comes to this question. Next up, unanswered questions, parachute payments. So one of the big issues with Pro Rel, teams go down, money goes down. Will relegated teams receive financial support from them and adjust parachute payments to go into the championship opening?
So the thing about this question is it may not be necessarily germane in a real sense, because USL isn't driving a ton of outside money anyway. In fact, you'll find people who tell you the way USL makes its money is off of expansion fees, more or less, right? That's the way the money comes into the corporate entity that is USL. parachute payments largely come from broadcast rights, which is something you see in England. There's also a very distinct possibility that, yes, there could be a significant increase in expenses when you go up, but when you go down, you may not actually have that much difference. It may not be a big drop in your revenue, depending on how fans respond. And I think there is something to be said for just, we don't know exactly what that looks like. If a club decides to go down, or if a club gets relegated rather, and goes down a division, will fans walk away from the team? Will corporate money dry up? Whatever it is that there are the revenue streams for USL clubs, which again aren't really tied into television revenue, will they dry up? I don't know that we know that for sure. I mean, there are examples of self-relegating clubs that have mostly been okay, and we haven't heard of any significant issues financially, like, say, the Richmond Kickers. It's probably more the other way, right? Clubs were probably going to need more help when they go up and take on bigger travel costs and things like that.
Moving on to our next unanswered question. This is a sticky one. Is this an open system or just a pro-rel system within one company? Territorial rights. Will those rights remain in place after the implementation of promotion relegation? So if a team moves up and they're in that territory, what happens then?
Yeah, I mean, there's no territorial rights outside of USL. USL can have their own internal territorial rights, meaning if there's a club in a town, you can't just walk into that town and start a new club. Number one, USL has to approve your franchise. So you can't do that without their approval. And if they think that you're going to cannibalize the team that already exists in that market, whatever the size of that market is, they're not going to authorize your club. But there is something to be said for the idea that pro-rel is, or at least pro-rel moves in the direction of an open system. This cannot be an open system because it's one league or one league structure within the wider picture of American soccer. They're not tied into MLS, and they're not tied into USL having, or US soccer rather, having a pyramid. So would there be an opportunity for, say, a USL 2 team in a given market? Because with USL 2, if you're talking about summer amateur teams, you're talking about a much lower level of entry. You're not really threatening the commercial opportunities for a professional club in the same area. But if that USL team decides it wants to go pro, and they suddenly want to go USL 1, and they say to the league, hey, we want to go pro, we want to engage in this pyramid, we want to go up, we want to be a first division team one day, how will USL handle that? I think those are still kind of, even though I don't think they're the most important questions, it is a question.
Once the system is in place, will new clubs have to enter at the bottom of the pyramid in League One?
Yeah, that's a good one. This I see the chat is talking about this too, right? Can you buy your way into Division One? I do think that we got an answer, a little bit of an answer in some of what was reported by Paul Tenorio. I don't think it was in the league's release or the league's information per their website, but I do think it said that this was going to be a combination of teams moving from the championship and expansion teams, Rob. So at least initially, when they populate Division One, it sounds like USL is open to the idea that you just buy your way in, and then you start engaging with the pyramid.
And then waivers. How many PLS waivers is USL expecting to request from the federation? This
is maybe a little out of order because we probably should address this when we ask the question of whether they're engaged with US Soccer on PLS. This is unknowable. This is just unknowable, right? This is unknowable until they get to the point of, here are the teams that we want to launch first division with. Here are the teams that we want in the second division. Here are their stadiums. Here are their marketplaces. Here are their whatever the details are, right? Moving these chess pieces around and trying to figure out what exactly it looks like is probably not done yet, especially if they are imagining that they will find new expansion franchises to populate their first division. That you can't know what that looks like yet. We don't know what their stadiums are like. We don't know what again, their owners have to have a certain level of capital in order to meet the PLS, all of those things.
So our final unanswered question, the Division One application process. How many clubs have applied so far? And we haven't actually heard from the league who's applied, but through parsing through what clubs have stated and released, we do have a cursory list of a handful of teams.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that again, USL controlling the narrative on steps forward from the original announcement back in February of last year to where we are now. And yet again, because the clubs are independent, right? Their franchises operating within USL, but they're independent from the league in terms of messaging. There are clubs who have said, we want to be first division. We've applied for first division. And, even the idea that there's an application process, right? And is that something like, is USL going to be, again, vetting clubs in order to be first division, or are they kind of going to be looking around going, well, we need a club over there. We better build that team up, or we better find some way to make that team first division or push them in that direction. I think is interesting. So which clubs do we have, Rob?
So we have 4, I believe we have confirmed: Louisville, Pittsburgh, North Carolina FC, and Sporting Jacks. And a couple others that have verbally expressed interest, including Detroit, Sacramento, and Rhode Island. And then there's a couple others not listed that meet stadium requirements that we're assuming.
Yeah, I don't think we can mention them. I do think that Sporting Jacks is interesting only because they haven't played yet, right? That's a new team, and they're already like, we're going to go D1, and that's okay. All right. I mean, I see you over there, and obviously Jacksonville's a big city, so that part of it they have no problem with, but there are some things to be determined there. And I, again, in terms of the clubs making their statements, that is as much to paint themselves as big time and, maybe capture attention within their marketplaces as anything else, right? It's just sort of good business to say, we want to be the biggest team we could possibly be and be in the top division that USL is launching.
So about a year after the original announcement of Division 1 for USL and then the subsequent announcement of promotion relegation, of our list of 10 questions, answers we have now at this stage, I think we're at about 1.5 out of 10 here, Jason.
Yeah, it's something like that. We haven't made a ton of progress in a year, but there's, it's a slow walk, Rob, I guess.
So we will follow this story and try to get as many answers as possible as we continue along here on our path to dot the map of the ever-changing American soccer landscape. Thank you, Mr. Bob, for the donation. And as we go, feel free to hit subscribe, become a member, and help support Morning Kickaround.